Okay, there we go. Before we release the kids, I wanted to take a second to honor our veterans. So if you are a person who served in our armed forces or currently serve, would you stand? We just want to say thank you for you, who you are. See, the thing about people who served in our armed forces, thank you. One of the common themes about the people who serve in our armed forces is they want no attention. And so it's like when I don't tell them that we're going to stand, I'm going to ask them to stand at church because they won't come. No, we thank you for your service to our country and for being shining examples of all that's good here. Kids, you guys are released to Kids Church. We wanted you guys to be part of that. So you guys are free to go. Some people had snuck out already, so they're going to get detention. They're not allowed to have any fun. Aria, tell them, if they left early, no fun. Just kidding. They wouldn't listen anyway. But it was nice that none of my kids shouted out this morning. If you're new with us, one time, actually it was last week, I was making a joke about kids leaving, and my son started yelling at me as he was leaving the room. So that didn't happen. We have that to be thankful for. Welcome. By the way, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Jason. I am the pastor here at FDC. If you're new with us, thank you so much for spending a little bit of your Sunday morning with us. It is an honor and a privilege to have you here. And we are starting a new series today, and I got to get my notes, and so I'm kind of playing with my tablet as I talk. But, yep, that's a fail. But before we start a new series, we're going to talk about a new series called Friendsgiving. But before we do that, I want to share something that maybe my tablet will let me do. That's been on my heart lately. I was doing some reading in Mark chapter 9. And in Mark chapter 9, there's this story of a dad who brings his son to Jesus and the disciples. And the dad says the son's possessed by a spirit, and he asks the disciples to cast out this spirit. And he says, and the disciples try to do it, and they fail. And so they bring the boy to Jesus. And the father says, "Can you help my son? He's possessed, he's got a spirit in him, and the spirit is out to harm him. Sometimes he throws himself in the fire, sometimes he throws himself in the water, always with the desire to harm the child." And Jesus says to the father, "This is possible if you have faith." And the father says, "I believe that you can do this." This is paraphrase. And so Jesus responds to that man's faith and casts out the spirit from the boy. And the disciples are troubled by this because Jesus did something they couldn't do. And so they go to Jesus afterwards and they're like, "Jesus, what happened there?" And this is in Mark chapter 9. And Jesus is talking to them, and he says, it says, after Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, "Why couldn't we drive him out?" He replied, "This kind can only come out through prayer." Recently, it's become very clear to me that for many people here at Faith Discovery Church, our families are in crisis. And I've seen this manifest itself in marriages going through difficult times. I've seen this manifest itself in sibling relationships at odds. I've seen it manifest itself in troubling parent-child relationships. And there are some people who come to our church there are some families who are praying for their kids and their grandkids to come back to church. And so in a number of different ways, there seems to be a spiritual attack on families in our church, in our region, in our country, in our world. And that's troubling to me. And I like to be the guy who has all the answers. And I don't have any. And I was thinking about this, and I was listening to a chorus that we're going to sing a lot next month as I was driving down the road contemplating this, and this passage came to my mind, and it said, I thought about where Jesus says, this kind can only come out through prayer. And there's the answer. I don't have the ability to fix it all, but I can pray. Because there is power in prayer. And so we're going to have some family prayer nights here at Faith Discovery Church. In fact, the 4 Wednesday nights of Advent, starting the last Wednesday night of Thanksgiving of November. It's not a Wednesday night of Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is only one day. The last Wednesday night of November, and then the 3 Wednesdays. Try not to confuse people, Jason. The last Wednesday night of November and the first 3 Wednesday nights of December, we're going to take and we're going to pray as a church for families. Not just marriages, but marriages. Not just parent-sibling relations, parent-child relationships, but parent-child relationships. Not just siblings, but siblings. Anything that is impacting your family, come pray. And if nothing is impacting your family, we need you to come pray for us. And so as a church, we're going to spend they're going to be very unpolished, no run sheets. That could get thrown off anyway. I'm going to open it up. I'll probably have a playlist. We'll have some handouts for kind of how we'll pray. May have some people lead with some scripture. But ultimately, we're going to take an hour on Wednesday nights for 4 weeks, and we're going to provide an opportunity for God to do something big. And we'll see what happens. In 2 Samuel 15, I think it's 2 Samuel, it might be 1 Samuel 15. Jonathan is serving under his father Saul's army. And the scripture says they were under a pomegranate tree. And God's directed Saul to go fight the enemy, but he's afraid because he's got 600 guys. He's got 600 guys and he's got 2 swords. One for him and one for Jonathan. And he's paralyzed with fear, so he sits there. And in the middle of the night, Jonathan wells up with faith, and Jonathan turns to his armor bearer, the one person who he has authority over, and he says, let's go over to the Amalekites, and perhaps God will work on our behalf. That's not the word we typically put on our bumper stickers. Perhaps God will do something. We're going to pray for 4 Wednesdays, and perhaps God will do something incredible in our families. So that's something that's been burning inside me. I'm passionate about. We're going to do that. I invite you to join us. Put it on your calendar. Put it on your calendar. This time of year, there's a million things to do. And every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to other things. And it's very easy for the pastor to get up and say, you should say yes to the things that are important to me. Please don't take it that way. Let's say yes to see what God would do on behalf of our families. I know it'll mean you're out not doing something you probably were invited to. But let's see what God would do. That's all I'm going to say about that. I got a bumper for our Friendsgiving, and let's transit. There you go. Play that, because I'll keep talking. Okay, we're in the middle of Thanksgiving season for some of us. For some of us, we're in the middle of the Christmas season. The Christmas music has started. Somebody told me this morning, Chris told me this morning, that every time somebody puts up lights before Thanksgiving, Santa shoots an elf. I like that one. Although I love Christmas lights. I love Christmas. But we're in the time of year where people debate, what's your favorite holiday? One study I read this week said Thanksgiving is the most popular holiday in the United States, followed by Christmas. Then New Year's Eve and Halloween both make the top 10. So in the last 2 months and a day, October 31st and then the last 2 months of the year, it's a very festive time here in America. And in New Jersey, add into November, teachers convention, so students get another holiday, more time off school. It's a fun time of year, November and December. And lately it's like 75 degrees here in New Jersey. So you get all the holidays and you can wear flip-flops. What's better than that? But it's a time when people, even people here in the northeastern part of the country, seem to be ready and willing to engage each other in welcoming manners. And so this week and next, I'd like to share about how important it is that we as Christians follow the example of that incredibly famous and wise American, Mr. Rogers. Nobody knows who Mr. Rogers is? It's a movie with Tom Hanks. He had a little trolley. It's important that I want to talk about how important it is that we start to say, hello, neighbor. In Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is talking. It's part of a passage called the Sermon on the Mount. And starting in verse 13, he says, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salt again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and then put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light so shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Last night, we were driving through this area. One of the things I love about where we live is it gets dark at night. And this time of year, it gets dark early at night, but it gets so dark. And so we were driving actually over in Pennsylvania, and it was probably 8 o'clock at night, so it's pitch black, and I'm really just watching out for deer. And up on this hillside, there was this house that has put in some time in decorating for Christmas. It was like a glowing beacon of the holidays are coming. And I was nowhere near it, but I could see it from a long way away. In the middle of the darkness, you can see the bright light. And Jesus talks about how we as people, as Christians, as Christ followers, are to be that in this world. We're to be salt. We're to provide flavor. We're supposed to be light. We should be beaming examples of hope and of love in our world. Next Thursday, many of us will sit around tables and enjoy copious amounts of food, surrounded by varying degrees of family and friends. Thanksgiving, from its earliest origin in colonial times, has always been about, well, what do you think it's always been about? I'm taking answers. It's always been about food. What else? It's been about family. What else? Football. From its earliest days. Those colonial Thanksgivings, the Patriots had games. Trust me. What else? Sharing. Thanks. Anyone else? Okay, sweet potatoes. This is totally an aside, but Joy's not in the room, so she won't know I say this. Her family doesn't have potatoes at Thanksgiving. It's like un-American. See, I can't get in trouble. She's not here. I'll know who told. Thanksgiving's been about community. It's been about engaging with other people. It's not about being alone. It's about turkey, about people, about food. For those of you who don't know, Joy and I live in Belvedere, and we will have potatoes on Thanksgiving. And we live in a beautiful home, way nicer than anything we thought we would ever have. It was redone by somebody who, people we purchased it from bought a home that was in bad shape, and they fixed it, and then they sold it to us. And most of the house is just as it was when we moved in, except we've painted some rooms. And one of the things we love about the house when we first saw it was the community it sits in. As we were thinking about moving out here, as we're looking at houses, most of the houses that we looked at were on large portions of property. And in retrospect, did I want to mow that whole thing? But we'll call that aside. But we had one of our children is very social. And for us to have moved into a place where you couldn't see the neighbor's house would have been difficult for him. So as we drove around communities, happened to drive through Belvedere. We knew that house was on the market, and we were contemplating it, and we drove by 3rd Street School, and there were kids playing in the playground. And we were like, this is the community we want to live in. Because there were kids our son's age playing outside, and we thought, there's a good chance he'll be playing with them pretty soon. The neighborhood had a sense that you could walk around and see people. In fact, that's been the case. Joy and I are often sitting on our porch, and we'll walk by, and people will say, oh, you have a beautiful home. I love the porch. Thank you. And then a lot of people who grew up in Belvedere will start to tell us their story of that house when they were little kids. Oh, and forgive me, but I don't remember the people's names who lived there for a long time. But they would put a Christmas tree out on the front porch. And people would, and it was like a celebratory house, apparently. I never was there. But I love hearing people tell me their stories about the place that we live in. We've felt every house that we've ever had. We've felt that God has given that to us so that we could be hosts, that we could welcome people in. And and that's all, that's been a goal of ours. We want to get to know our neighbors. We want to get to know our neighbors for multiple reasons. One of the reasons that we want to get to know our neighbors is we feel called to this church and to this community and to this region. And we want to share what's happening here with the people in our town. We want to share life with them, get to know them, be their friends, and tell them what's important to us. And the best way for us to share what's important to us, which is our faith, the best way for us to share what's our faith with them is to share our life with them. Jesus didn't tell people in the Sermon on the Mount, go into your community and preach. He said, go be salt and light. Engage people. Get to know them. Let them see that you're different. And when they see you're different, you know what's going to happen? They're going to glorify God because of what they see in you. We live in a society that is segmented. More and more. We live in a society where people engage, talk, hang out with, and be with people who think, act, look, same age as themselves. In today's world, for the most part, the best way to live out verse 16 is to build relationships with people. The impact of our influence on the world grows when we participate in the world. In His Great Commission, Jesus instructed the disciples to go Jesus instructed His disciples to go make disciples. Discipleship happens through relationship. And today I propose that the most effective place for the development of relationships is the table. Joy and I aspire to invite people to our table. In our house, the one room that we significantly changed in our house was the kitchen. And through some people being very gracious to us, and the fact that Joy's dad is a carpenter, so he did the work. And I know you've all heard me say seemingly bad things about in-laws, so I just wanted on the record, I just talked positively about my father-in-law. But they built a big island type thing, and that island, it's got overhang, it's got stools that people sit on. It's become the focal point of our house. It's the place where everybody gathers. It's the table. And for centuries, the table has been a place where people gathered. Jesus had a habit of eating with sinners. And to many of his contemporaries, to many of the more holy people of his day, this was a scandalous activity on his part. But he was known to sit at the table with people with bad reputations like tax collectors, Zacchaeus, Matthew. And at least once we see him sit at the table with a woman who she's described in varying ways in Luke chapter 7 in different translations. But she didn't have a great reputation. To put it kindly, she lived a sinful life. And Jesus, she shares a table with Jesus, she comes to worship him. Scandalous as all this was, Jesus defended it as keeping with his saving mission. He had come to talk to save sinners. He'd come to engage them. When asked, why are you hanging out with these people? By the way, if that's the question we're asking, we're already starting off on the wrong foot. Why are you hanging out with sinners? And Jesus said, the healthy don't need a doctor. It's the sick. Those of us who know Jesus, we need Jesus. But how much more do the people who don't need to see us engage with them? So that they'll see our good works, not hear us preach and condemn and judge, but they'll see the way we act. And just maybe God will do something on their behalf. But it starts at the table. Jesus had come to seek and to save the lost. It was this very reason for the incarnation. He came into the world to save sinners. And so, of course, he socialized with them. And he was intentional about how he used these engagements with them to inspire them. Jesus was intentional about spending time with people who had different beliefs than him. More and more in our culture, that's becoming a rarity. We watch channels who say things we agree with. We talk to people that we agree with. We avoid people we don't. I'm not saying us as Christians. I'm not talking about us as church. I'm talking about us as a society. We're more and more divisive. Jesus was intentional about spending time with people who had different beliefs than him. When we spend time with people who are different than us, it's not always easy. It's not always comfortable. As a pastor, one of the things I like, when I spend time with people, I typically don't tell people I'm a pastor unless they ask. I don't wear a collar. and I just try to be a person. And one of the places that I get to do this is on the golf course. Because very rarely am I golfing as part of a foursome. So I'm usually golfing with somebody who I've never met before. And it takes about 10 to 11 holes for them to ask me what I do. Because I ask tons of questions. I'm annoying with the amount of questions I ask. I want to hear people's stories. I want to get to know them. I want to know everything about them. People are like, I just came to golf. Would you leave me alone? But I'm there to get to know people. A great opportunity. I'm not there to save anyone. I don't save them anyway. Jesus does. But I want to get to know people. So I ask questions. But it takes about 10 or 11 holes. What do you do? I'm a pastor. Oh. Their language changes. They apologize to me for the swears as if it had anything to do with me. They'll hit a bad shot, and they'll say things in ways probably I would choose different. Sometimes being around people who believe differently than me is awkward. It's much easier to be around you. I love Sunday mornings. I get up early on Sunday mornings. That's how excited I am to be with you. I'm not a morning person, except for Sunday mornings. But there's something that's intentional about hanging out with people. It's not going to be easy, and you have to be willing to listen. And you have to be willing to not prioritize them agreeing with us. It would seem as though there's something more for us to learn from the way Jesus did things. It's difficult not to think that Jesus was establishing himself as some kind of role model. In fact, insofar as the Gospels were written for believers, it's not difficult to see the writers themselves presenting Jesus as the pattern. The point is, Jesus socialized as a means to reach the lost, to impact, to be influential. Now, he didn't just hang out with sinners to participate in their activities. He set an example. He drew a line. He had a moral compass that he was strict to. We don't just hang out with people just to hang out with people. We become friends with people. We share a table with them. The thing about the table that I want to get to before we go pack boxes. The table is a welcoming place. When you sit down at a table with people who see life differently than you, the table tends to take away some of the awkwardness. It's a place of social welcoming. It's a place of theological and philosophical dialogue. Something about food makes people more comfortable to share what they believe and to listen to what you believe. It's a place of listening and learning. It's a place of sharing. We talked about that. Thanksgiving is the idea of sharing. The table is a place of sharing. It's a place to hear stories. Every one of us has a story. They say that most people's favorite word in the English language, you know what it is? Their name. Every person has a name. Every person has a story. And most of us know how to share it at varying levels of comfort. But when you express interest in hearing someone's story, when you share food with somebody, it opens the doors to opportunity. When you share ideas with somebody, When I engage some of my friends who are of different worldviews, faiths, and I don't try to proselytize them, convert them the first time we meet, some of them are shocked. Because the reputation is Christians are all about what we want. And let me tell you something. I want them to meet Jesus. I do. But I think it's best served by me just being their friend. We're going to share ideas, and I'm going to talk to them about how Christ has impacted my life. And when they do that, just maybe God will do something on their behalf. But the table is a place of stories. It's a place to share food. It's a place to share ideas. It's a place to eat stuff you're not comfortable with. If you're like me, there's like 3 things you're comfortable with: hamburgers, chicken fingers, and chicken parm. And so it becomes very limiting. So you go and you allow people to expose you to new things. And when that happens, you tell your story and you listen to their story and things open up. And suddenly you're talking about life things because you came to the table together. It's the opportunity of the open seat, the invitation to welcome somebody into your life that maybe makes a lasting impact on their life. Several aspects of our society show us that we're becoming increasingly more isolated. If we as a church, if we're really going to be a place where people are welcomed and cared for, we have to be intentional as people of our church about sharing the table with people who think, look, live, act, believe differently than we do without being threatened by those differences. We don't have to be scared of somebody who thinks differently than us. And just maybe the love that Jesus gives us that we share with others will make a difference because they've never experienced somebody accepting them, loving them, serving them that way. Engaging our neighbors opens the opportunity. I love this. Let me tell you what my natural way to think is. Engaging opportunities opens the door for me to share my story with them. That's my agenda. Here's God's. Engaging our neighbors creates opportunity to serve them. Jesus said, you want to be great? Serve. Invitations to church happen through our serving our communities. You see, according to surveys by Religion in America Life, only 2 to 3% of people find a church through advertising, through Facebook ads. 2 to 3% of the people who go to a new church found that church through advertising, radio ads, social media, that kind of stuff. 85% were invited by a friend or a relative. You want to show somebody what's important to you? Serve them. And when the conversation comes up, what you do, invite them to church. Just maybe it'll happen. Now, you're going to engage people who will be like, I don't know if I'm allowed to invite them because maybe they have purple hair. Maybe they have orange hair. Maybe their hair will match the pews. Maybe they don't have hair. Thanks. We're including everybody. We came out of a really intense series where we talked about stewardship and giving. These few weeks, I want to talk about real practical living in our community. This is the time of year people are willing to be invited to things. They're willing to come over to your place for dinner. There are people who don't have a place to go on Thanksgiving, and they're waiting for people to invite them. They'll say yes. They're also willing to go to church if you'll invite them.